New York is a city of light, noise, and endless haste. Here, skyscrapers pierce the sky, streets pulsate with life, and the subway never sleeps. But beneath this shiny surface, there is something else. Beneath the glass and concrete, there lives another New York, the one that the guidebooks don't tell you about. A city of shadows, disappearances, underground rooms, vanishing trains, and people who shouldn't exist. These aren't legends. These are documented facts, official records, and confessions from those who dared to tell. And today we will go through 15 such stories, strange, disturbing, and still unexplained. New York hides more than it seems, and today you will see for yourself. The secret room at New York University Library. Hidden behind austere neo-Gothic facades, the New York University Library seems safe and understandable. Every day, hundreds of students pass through its halls, flipping through books, clicking away at laptops, staring at screens, never looking up. They think that everything in this building is arranged rationally: floors, catalogs, schedules. But in 2004, a random hammer blow punched a hole in this confidence, literally. It all started with a simple renovation. University officials gave permission to restore the lower level of Bob's library, a concrete basement that housed old archives and outdated volumes that weren't eligible for loan. Contractors began work, chipping away at a section of wall to make way for a ventilation duct. And suddenly, beneath the concrete and brick, they discovered a cavity. This was not just a technological gap. Behind the destroyed part of the wall, a room opened up, cramped, almost square, without windows and a single narrow door that was walled up from the inside. There was no record of the existence of this room in the building plans. The room had no ventilation, was not connected to the power grid, and, according to all official documents, it did not exist at all. What was found inside caused an immediate halt to all work. The floor was covered in a thick layer of dust, as if the room had not been opened for decades. In the center stood a wooden chair, firmly bolted to the floor with 4 rusty bolts. Next to it was a narrow table with an empty drawer. On the walls were scratches, lines, and symbols, as if someone had scratched them out in desperation with their nails or some other sharp object. At first they were thought to be just random marks, but one of the architects who studied the room recognized some of the drawings as a repeating pattern, similar to a cryptographic cipher from the Second World War. In the right corner of the room stood a wooden bookcase with books. There were not many of them, less than 2 dozen. Thick bindings, no titles on the spines, no library records. Most of them were written in Latin, a few in Hebrew, and one of the old French dialects. Particular attention was drawn to a book with a blackened leather cover, on which was burned a symbol resembling a closed human palm with a missing thumb. There was no text inside, only images, diagrams of anatomy, geometric shapes, intersecting circles, and strange images of a man with holes where his face should be. On the last page was a single handwritten note in English. He saw the mirror and forgot his name. Since the room was opened, the building has been acting strangely. 3 workers involved in dismantling the wall were taken to intensive care a few days later with symptoms of severe facial paralysis. None of them had any underlying medical conditions, had taken any toxic substances, and doctors were unable to pinpoint the exact cause. One of them later claimed to have seen the room again, in a dream. Only now, it was filled with dozens of people sitting on identical chairs with numbers scratched into their foreheads. In the weeks following the incident, students began complaining more frequently about headaches and nausea, and one classroom even experienced a short-term power outage that did not coincide with the scheduled power outages. Several people claimed to have seen lights coming from beneath the floor during the night. The university hastily organized a re-examination of the underground level, but official comments were limited to unforeseen engineering difficulties. When the story began to leak into the student press, the university closed access to the repair documentation, and some staff were transferred to other sites. According to a former student who had interned in the archives service, the room was again walled up, only this time behind an additional layer of concrete, and a new protocol was introduced into the electronic access system to the basement, not connected to the general database of the university. The basement itself became completely closed to students and teachers. The official story still stands: a construction error, minor damage, contractor overreaction. But many at NYU and beyond are convinced the room was intentional. Someone built it in the heart of an academic building, with no access, no windows, no purpose other than to hide something from the world. No camera recorded the moment the wall was opened. The only surviving image is a blurry photo taken on a phone by one of the workers before he began having epileptic seizures. You can see that very chair on it, and in front of it, on the floor, there is something written in red. It is impossible to make out exactly, but if you zoom in, some claim that the word unread is written there. The house on Riverside Drive where no one could sleep. On Riverside Drive, in the Upper West Side, there is a modest brick house, unremarkable from the outside. It is hidden between two high-rise residential buildings and easily lost against the backdrop of expensive Manhattan architecture. 3 floors, 4 apartments, a narrow entrance with a peeling door. The house, at first glance, is old, but quite ordinary. However, in the last 6 years, it has changed tenants more than any other house in the neighborhood. And it's not because of the rent, noisy neighbors, or mold on the ceiling. People left because they couldn't sleep. Not in a figurative sense, not because of insomnia or anxiety. It was about not being able to sleep at all, as if something was happening inside the walls of this building that prevented the brain from switching off. Almost all the tenants moved out within 3 days of moving in. Those who tried to stay longer ended up in emergency rooms, shaking, confused, and paranoid. Some claimed to feel their thoughts becoming alien, as if someone or something was watching them from inside their heads. In 2019, Columbia University student couple Lindsay and Jason rented a second-floor apartment. They moved in that evening and realized on their first night that something was wrong. They told friends that as soon as they tried to go to bed, an endless internal noise seemed to start in their heads. Not a sound, not a voice, but something like the flickering of thoughts that weren't there. Words, phrases, images of other people's memories, bursting out like from a broken radio. And yet, there was absolute silence in the house. They tried to sleep on the floor, in the bathroom, on the landing, to no avail. Sleeping pills did not work. Even the diazepam that Lindsay received on prescription from the doctor did not provide the slightest relaxation. On the 3rd night, Jason tried to leave for the hotel, but on the way he developed tachycardia and a panic attack. He was taken to hospital. Lindsay, left alone, claimed to have heard someone walking around the kitchen downstairs, although the door was locked and no one had come in. In the morning, she called a taxi and never returned. The owner of the building refused to comment on what was happening. He said that he doesn't have to explain why someone is not getting enough sleep. But the documents show that almost every rental lasted between 2 and 4 days, and since 2020, a strange wording has appeared in rental agreements: the need to confirm the tenant's psycho-emotional stability during long-term residence. In 2021, a group of neuroscientists from Cornell attempted to examine the building. One of the scientists, Dr. Hugo Shapiro, set up devices in the bedroom of a 3rd-floor apartment. Within 2 hours, an unusual increase in alpha-band brain activity was recorded in all 3 participants, although none of them were in the sleep phase. One of them later claimed that, for some reason, he recalled childhood memories of an unknown woman. The measurements recorded short but regular pulsating electromagnetic bursts within one frequency, 17.6 hertz. No household or urban device was working in this range at that time. Once the participants left the building, brain activity returned to normal. One of the most disturbing episodes occurred in the winter of 2022. A young woman who had checked into the building through Airbnb was found unconscious and severely dehydrated in Riverside Park 4 days later. Doctors determined that she had not slept the entire time. There was an audio recording on her phone from the 2nd night. In the recording, she can be heard crying and repeating the phrase, "They are in my head and they have no eyes." It later became known that in the 19th century, a private hospital was located on the site of the current house, where neuropsychiatric experiments were conducted on veterans of the Civil War. The building burned down under strange circumstances in 1898, and the archives were destroyed. But on old city maps, you can find the signature, H.W. Mine Clinic. Today, the house is still for rent. The ads disappear as quickly as the tenants, and although from the outside, it looks like part of the ordinary urban landscape, flat, calm, unremarkable, those who once entered it and tried to sleep no longer call it simply home. Underground tunnels under Central Park. Central Park is the green heart of Manhattan, a wide ribbon stretched out among glass and concrete. Thousands of people walk along its paths every day. sit on benches, listen to street musicians, unaware that beneath their feet lies not just a system of utility lines, but something much older, much deeper, and perhaps completely alien to our world. Officially, there are only technical corridors, old cable tunnels, several ventilation shafts, and a closed drainage system located under the park. But starting in the late 19th century, strange documents began to emerge in the city's archives. Diagrams showing passages and chambers that are not present in modern drawings. Some end in dead ends, others disappear underground toward the east side, where the apartment buildings are supposed to be. In one such drawing from 1891, the architect's handwriting at the bottom reads, "Entrance to be blocked up. Beyond is the old." One of the most famous stories happened in 1932, when a boy named Benjamin Stack disappeared from the park during an afternoon walk. Witnesses claimed he was playing near a boulder near what is now Bethesda Terrace. His mother turned around for a second, and the boy was gone. Police searched the area, searched underground utilities, called in divers to check the pond. No trace of him. 2 months later, a worker laying telephone cable in the 72nd Street area found a child's shoe in an underground hole, just like the one Benjamin's mother had described. The problem was that the hole was over 20 meters deep, in a place where there had never been any mines or tunnels. Since then, rumors about underground tunnels have multiplied. They say that in the southern part of the park, closer to the Plaza Hotel, there is a metal door that leads to nowhere. It is sometimes opened by maintenance services, but no ordinary citizen has seen a person enter or exit it. There is no sign at the entrance. Inside, an old staircase leads down and disappears into the darkness. One former Parks Department employee, who wished to remain anonymous, said he was tasked with plugging a hole in the asphalt near the Shakespeare Gardens in the 1990s. During the survey, they came across stonework, perfectly smooth, without seams, clearly not modern. Under it, there was a passage, narrow, with an arched vault. According to the instructions, they were supposed to fill everything with concrete. But, according to him, after the work was completed, he was ordered to destroy the photographs and not raise the topic again. On Digger and Stalker forums, you can find reports from those who tried to independently explore the dungeons under Central Park. Some claim to have stumbled upon walled-up doors with an emblem reminiscent of the old Masonic symbol. One described a round room under an earthen dome, where the walls were covered with soot, and in the center there was a stone pedestal with a depression, as if for an altar. Others, that they heard a metallic hum coming from the depths, as if old mechanisms were turned on when approaching. In 2017, a group of tourists entered the park at night, through one of the service entrances that was open during the cleanup. Among them was a photographer who was passionate about urban architecture. He claims that near the Ramble, they found a wooden door in the ground, partially covered with sheets. It was unlocked. After descending a few meters, they found themselves in a narrow tunnel with stone walls, where the temperature dropped sharply. On the walls are dark symbols carved into the stone. In a photo that later appeared on Reddit, you can see a spiral sign reminiscent of ancient Celtic patterns. The tourists claim that after a few minutes, the tunnel began to sound. Not with words, but with some kind of vibrational hum. They were overcome with panic and climbed out. The door slammed behind them. When journalists from a local publication tried to verify this story, they did not find the entrance. There is now a flower bed in that place. City officials officially deny the existence of hidden tunnels under Central Park, other than technical ones. However, in 2021, at an infrastructure hearing, a strange line in a report surfaced. Maintenance of sealed lots, dapat 1922, Central Subterranean Sector, a term that does not appear in public documents. The park continues to live its daily life, with laughter, jogging, and boats on the pond. But at night, especially in the quiet hours between 2 and 4, old-timers say that the ground trembles slightly in certain places, and if you put your ear to the stone balustrade by the pond, you can hear something that doesn't sound like water or wind. It's more like movement, very slow and very far away. Homeless in the subway. The New York subway is a living organism. It hums, breathes, moves, and hides under thousands of feet. Millions of passengers glide through its tunnels every day, and no one looks a stranger in the eye. It's easy to get lost here, and easy to disappear. But starting in 2012, stories began to surface in various parts of the city about a man who couldn't be explained. Or more accurately, about people who looked exactly like people who were already dead. The first recorded incident occurred at the 14th Street Union Square Station. A woman named Carol, a nurse, was riding home after a night shift. She saw a homeless man on the platform. Beard, hoodie, dirty jacket, swaying gait. Nothing out of the ordinary. But the moment he turned his head, Carol froze. It was the face of her former patient, the man who had died in her ward of a heart attack 3 days ago. He was lying in her arms. She had seen his body carried away. And yet, she recognized him. Exactly. Unmistakably. She came closer. The man, as if sensing this, looked at her, slightly bowed his head, and stepped into the next train. Carol followed him, but, according to her, at the next station he was no longer there. CCTV cameras provided at the request of the MTA did not record a single person resembling the person described, and on the platform where he allegedly boarded, there was only one passenger at the time, according to the recordings, Carol herself. A week later, a conductor on the D-Line Overnight Express told a similar story. He reported a man in a gray coat sitting alone at the end of the train. When the train arrived at its final destination, the man was still sitting there, except that his face seemed to have a shadow. The worker went to wake him, but, as he put it, there was no one there. The next night he saw him again, on the same bench. He quit a month later, refusing to give a reason. Over time, descriptions began to appear that matched down to the smallest detail. The same silhouette, the same eyes, the same look. Tired, empty, as if fenced off from the world. Only one thing changed: the face. Each time it matched the appearance of a person who had recently died in that area. Surprisingly, almost all descriptions of these meetings took place 2 or 3 days after death, when news sites published photos of the deceased. In one case, a woman identified the figure of her dead son, a former veteran. She saw him at the turnstile at 34th Street, Penn Station. He was standing as usual, with his right hand on his hip. He had a pelvic injury. But when she called out to him, he didn't turn around. He simply stepped into the crowd and disappeared. Some theories put it all down to coincidences and psychological breakdowns, stress, grief, obsessive images. However, in several cases, the cameras actually captured a figure entering the train car, but not exiting, not crossing the turnstile, not crossing the platform, not walking up the stairs. It simply disappeared between stations. In 2018, paranormal researcher Professor Arthur Lowell of Hunter College attempted to systematize the data. He collected 42 testimonies made in different years, in different areas, from people with no connections to each other. Almost all descriptions began with one detail: a strong smell of dust and copper, as if an old panel or archive box had been opened nearby. This was the smell that most witnesses smelled before they noticed the figure. But there was something else. Several people, all homeless, claimed to know a man with strange faces. They called him the Crosser, or the one who didn't choose a side. He always showed up, they said, at the third station from where a person died, always against a wall, always alone, and always waiting. In 2022, a teenager took a short video on his phone at the J Street Metrotech station. He focused on a strange man in a shabby jacket, sitting with his back to him. At one point, the man turns his head to the camera, and the image distorts, as if an electronic glitch runs across the frame. His face is indistinct, just a general blur and a dim light in the eyes. A moment later, the figure disappears. No sudden movement, no editing, just disappears. The video ended up on TikTok, got millions of views, and was deleted a day later without explanation. All reposts also disappeared. The MTA always responds to official inquiries with the same answer. No confirmed anomalies have been registered in the system. But there is an unwritten rule among the workers. If you see someone who looks too familiar, don't approach. Don't call, don't look them in the face. Because, as one old driver said at a meeting of a depot veterans, some trains only go one way, and not always the living board them. Windowless Tower, number 33 in the Financial District. At the intersection of Thomas and Church Streets, in the midst of Manhattan's bustling financial district, there stands a strange building. It's hard to miss. 170 meters of gray concrete, no windows, no signs, no flags, no logos. Just smooth concrete walls, as if carved from a monolith. The building is known as 33 Thomas Street, but those interested in urban anomalies have long since acquired another name, the Tower That Doesn't Look. Officially, it is a telecommunications hub built in 1974 for Western Union, later transferred to AT&T. It can withstand a nuclear strike, has its own autonomous water supply system, diesel generators, blackout zones, and reinforced doors. The tower does function. Equipment is delivered to it, and sometimes employees in gray uniforms enter, but no one has ever been seen looking out from there. In 2016, an investigation by The Intercept, based on leaks by Edward Snowden, revealed that 33 Thomas Street may be used as one of the NSA's key surveillance sites. Inside is a massive data center connected to major hubs of undersea and urban communications cables. But what's truly scary is not the secret services, but the stories of those who claim that the building is under surveillance, in and of itself. Several workers in nearby buildings reported feeling intense discomfort when near the tower. Some had anxiety attacks, others had headaches that only occurred when they spent long periods of time outside near its eastern wall. One security guard at a nearby apartment complex reported that his dog refuses to come within 20 meters of the base of the building. It begins to howl, digs in its paws, and turns back. At night, radio reception is often disrupted above the tower. Regular radio stations are interrupted by a dull noise, and sometimes by sharp pulses that resemble coded signals. One radio amateur claims to have decoded the fragment and received a sequence of numbers that matches the encoding of GPS coordinates of an abandoned sea lighthouse standing in the Atlantic without maintenance since 1972. In 2020, a blogger known by the pseudonym Urban Loops attempted to film a video on the roofs of nearby buildings to look inside through the ventilation grills. In his latest video, he claims that the building is lit up from the inside, but not evenly like regular lamps, but with a pulsating glow coming from the center upwards. The drone's camera, flying closer to the 5th level, recorded a strange magnetic distortion. The device turned off and the drone crashed. When he tried to climb the service ladder to the roof of the neighboring building, the door was already locked, although it had been open during the day. The blogger disappeared 3 days later. His YouTube channel was deleted, and the website domain was bought out and redirected to the AT&T page. On a radio repeater forum, one participant reported that he had worked as a contractor on the building for 3 years. According to him, the building has at least 11 floors, not 7, as stated in the documentation. Some levels are not marked in the elevator system and can only be accessed with a physical key and palm print authorization. He also mentioned that one of the lower levels is marked non-human access restricted, which caused a lot of discussion. The user later deleted his account and has not appeared since. On city maps available through the public archive, the building is labeled Structure 3705, Observation Point 3. However, in the Bureau of Construction archives of the 1970s, it was called Project XBT and was labeled No External Reflection Surfaces. This is a term more commonly used in aerospace engineering than architecture. Those who live nearby are used to giving the building a wide berth. It doesn't directly inspire fear, but it's excluded from the city. It doesn't live by its laws, it has no windows because it doesn't need to see. It listens, it waits, and perhaps at some point it will speak. Ghost Station City Hall. Deep beneath the streets of Lower Manhattan, in the curve of an ancient tunnel, lies one of the most beautiful and least known places on the New York City subway, the abandoned City Hall station. Its curved platform, mosaic arches, stained glass windows, and bronze chandeliers resemble the hall of an old train station somewhere in Europe, but it hasn't accepted passengers for more than 70 years. The station was officially closed in 1945 due to incompatibility with new trains and low cross-country ability. But even decades later, rumors about it do not subside, because some claim that the station is still alive, just not for everyone. It is impossible to get there from the street. All entrances are welded, walled up, and carefully guarded. However, trains of Line 6 make a U-turn through this underground hall. And if you stay on the train after the last stop, you can, with a little luck, catch a glimpse of the station hidden behind curved walls with a glint of light on the mosaic. But sometimes, very rarely, the train stops. The first such incident was recorded in 1978. A student named Arnie Glass was riding the 6th line at night, fell asleep, and woke up on an empty platform. The lights were dim, but they worked. The doors opened, no one came in. A man in a long coat and a wide-brimmed hat stood on the platform. He raised his head, and Arnie saw that his face was as if it had been obscured, not covered, but as if erased. He closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them, the figure had disappeared. The train moved again. His story seemed outlandish until 1983, when a Line 6 train driver filed a report that the signal system showed a dummy landing at City Hall Station. The train braked and, he said, the doors opened on their own, despite the fact that there are no functioning automatic control systems at this station. No one got on, but cameras inside the car later recorded a change in lighting at the moment of boarding, as if someone had blocked the light source. In 1991, a group of diggers attempted to enter the station through an old technical passage. Only one of them, a man named Sam Winters, returned. The other two disappeared. Sam was found a day later in the tunnel, with deep scratches on his hands and face, and in a state of severe nervous breakdown. He did not speak, only repeating the phrase, "They don't walk on the rails, they walk on the walls." The MTA officially prohibits any attempts to enter the station area. Even during excursions, employees are accompanied by security, and the routes are strictly regulated. However, drivers periodically report abnormal stops, flashes of light, movement behind the glass, and strange sensor readings, as if the train had entered an area where something had already been. These messages are not made public, but are recorded in internal systems. In 2017, a journalist from an independent publication tried to take a photo report from the spread of Line 6. She stayed on the train, and when the train slowed down, she took a series of pictures from the window. In one of them, in the center of the platform, a human figure is clearly visible. Only the lens mirror is distorted, as if the space itself went into a wave in this place. Technical analysis of the photograph confirmed that the digital failure occurred in the center of the frame, for no apparent reason. This area turned out to be saturated with information noise. Although the photo was taken with a professional camera, some people believe that City Hall Station is not just a remnant of the past, but a crossing point, a node where layers of time and space temporarily touch. And when a train comes around that bend, especially at night, at a lonely hour, it feels like it's touching something that shouldn't be on the schedule. One driver, who quit in 2020, said something before leaving that his colleagues remembered. Nobody gets on at this station, because those who get on don't get off. Voices in the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel. The Brooklyn Battery is one of New York City's oldest and most important tunnels, running under the Hudson River, connecting Manhattan to Brooklyn. Thousands of cars pass through its narrow, confined space every day, unaware that they are nearly 100 feet underwater. But it is there, in the heart of the city's underground artery, that something begins to emerge that defies explanation. For more than 2 decades, drivers, police officers, maintenance workers, and ordinary commuters have reported the same thing. Voices. These are not simple noises, not the screeching of tires, not the howling of ventilation, not the interference of radio transmitters. These are distinct, human words, sounding somewhere nearby, as if someone is standing behind a concrete wall and whispering, as if from inside. They are heard through closed windows, with the engine running, sometimes, even through the music in headphones. Sometimes these are words in English, sometimes in an incomprehensible language, consisting of fragments, wheezing, numbers, as if a broken broadcast. One of the earliest documented cases occurred in 1999. A taxi driver named Raul Fernandez reported that around 3 a.m., while driving through a tunnel, he heard someone in his car say, "Don't brake." He instinctively looked around. The passenger was gone. He was driving alone. The radio was off. The voice was male, low, clear. A second later, his brakes failed and he crashed into a barrier on the exit ramp. He survived. Auto mechanics later determined that the brake fluid was normal and the pedal did not stick. No mechanical cause for the accident was found. In 2007, maintenance workers performing a routine inspection of cables in a side corridor of the tunnel recorded echo-like bursts of sound that were not consistent with equipment operation. One of them recorded audio on a dictaphone. The words, "We're still under here," can be heard on the recording. The voice is muffled, as if it were being heard through a thick layer of water or concrete. Technical analysis showed that the voice was not a reflection, a re-reflection of a signal, or a side effect of electricity. The source has not been identified. The peculiarity of voices is that they are not recorded stably. Numerous attempts to record sounds on a dictaphone, camera, phone, as a rule, failed. Either nothing was played or the file was damaged. But the live perception is always the same, the feeling that someone is talking nearby, although there is no one nearby. Some drivers reported hearing a child's cry, as if coming from the ventilation shafts. Others reported hearing a female voice repeating their name. There were cases when passengers began to panic in the middle of the tunnel, demanding that the car be turned around immediately and driven away. One of them, an ambulance driver, wrote in his report, "I didn't know who was telling me stop, but I heard it as if I was sitting next to him." In 2015, the tunnel was undergoing renovation work on its sound system. One engineer, who came from Boston, reported that he had detected resonances that were not explained by the architectural form. He said the vibration frequency was out of sync with the length of the tunnel, and that it felt like something was moving in the walls. He refused to continue the work, citing unintended acoustic distortions with potential psychological impact. Police reports include complaints of hallucinations, anxiety, and severe disorientation among drivers, especially at night. Some claimed to have suddenly heard the voice of a deceased relative uttering a short phrase related to their shared past. All cases occurred in the tunnel, and never anywhere else. Anomaly. Researchers attribute the phenomenon to the geometry of the space beneath the Hudson. It is believed that the inner tunnel creates a resonant zone where certain frequencies can trigger distorted remnants of sound, as if the memory of the space is replaying tragedies of the past. Since the 1940s, several dozen people have died in the tunnel, in accidents during fires and when temporary structures collapsed. According to one version, the sound prints of these deaths continue to live on. The strangest thing about this story is how the city reacts to it. Officially, nothing. All records in the archives are labeled as unconfirmed subjective observations. But according to unofficial information, several years ago, an autonomous active noise suppression system was installed under the tunnel. Only no one knows who is responsible for it. It is not indicated on the drawings, and when its devices are turned on, the voices become louder, as if they are angry. Roosevelt Hospital and the disappearance of patients. On the west side of Manhattan, between West End Avenue and Riverside Drive, stood a building that had long been part of the city's topography, Roosevelt Hospital, founded in the 19th century and operating for over a century. Among the brick buildings, echoing corridors, noises of coils, IVs, and voices of doctors in white coats, life went on, daily, ordinary, technical, until one day. Until a night that neither newspapers nor city services preferred to advertise. It happened in the winter of 1957, February 18th. It had been snowing since the morning, the temperature had dropped to -15, and the city had slowed down. In the hospital's neurology department, on the 3rd floor of the South Wing, there were 5 patients in one room, all men, all admitted with different diagnoses, from Parkinson's disease to post-stress disorders. None of them were considered dangerous. 2 were already getting ready to be discharged. The night nurse, according to protocol, entered the ward at 3:15, time for a routine checkup. The door was closed, as it should be, from the inside. Opening it, she found an empty room. Empty. Literally. The beds were still made up, the monitors were running, personal belongings were on the nightstands. No sound, no trace. All 5 had disappeared at the same time. The doctor who was called in examined the room. No signs of violence, forced entry, or fuss. All exits were locked. The guards claimed that no one had left the building. An internal investigation began. They checked the ventilation systems, the attics, the underground levels. They looked through the visitor log, the telephone exchange records. Nothing. The only odd thing is that at the moment of the supposed disappearance, a short but sharp drop in pressure in the oxygen system was recorded in the ward, as if something had sucked the air out of the room. But this is physically impossible. The system is autonomous, closed, and not connected to external channels. Security claimed the doors remained locked. There was no CCTV in the building at the time. It was installed in the 1960s. The duty officer's report mentioned a detail that was later deleted from the official version. A few minutes before the incident, a ripple appeared on the wall opposite the room, as if the air there was shaking, as if over a fire. One orderly compared it to the wave from the decay of the image on an old TV. After a day of searching, the hospital closed the ward, classified all records, and moved patients from adjacent rooms. The families of the missing received letters about the unforeseen move and the need for additional time to clarify the circumstances, but none of them ever found out what happened. In 1975, almost 20 years later, during the demolition of one of the hospital buildings, builders discovered an old steel door in the basement, walled up from the inside. Behind it was a narrow corridor leading to a spiral staircase that ended in a windowless cell with an iron table and a lamp. On the wall is a sign. This was the last attempt. They left according to their own rules. Below are 5 names, partially faded. All match the names of the missing patients. Officials dismissed the find as a remnant of a temporary shelter from World War II. The door was welded shut, the materials were removed, and the matter was closed. But the old-timers of Roosevelt, especially those who worked there that winter, kept the legend alive. They said that the building's ventilation noise fell silent that night, and that the silence became so thick that it seemed to absorb the sound of footsteps. Some still insist that it was not a mistake, not a crime, not an escape. It was a displacement, to a place where there are no names, only remains. Today, the southern wing is occupied by an administrative center, an ordinary office building, but its 3rd floor is not used. On the plan, it is designated as a spare technical level, and by the door leading to the former elevator, you can still see the erased number, 3B, the chamber of the disappeared. Abandoned elevator on 104th Street. At the intersection of 104th Street and Amsterdam Avenue stands an old dark brick apartment building. It doesn't stand out from other Upper West Side buildings except that no one has lived there for more than a few months since the late 1980s. At first, it was attributed to dilapidation, then to utility problems. But those who left the building almost always mentioned the same thing, the elevator. An internal lift, labeled Lift B, is listed on the 1937 plans, but is not included in any subsequent plans. However, the cabin is located at the end of the southern corridor, near the fire exit, and sometimes it works. The light inside is dim, the buttons are worn, and the display is not lit. But the door opens itself, sometimes at night, sometimes without a call. And every time someone decided to come in, something strange happened. One of the first documented cases was in 1992. A journalist from a local publication, filming a story about dilapidated housing, entered the elevator for the sake of a shot. A neighbor claims that he pressed the button and disappeared. He returned only 7 hours later, pale, with shaking hands. He couldn't explain where he was. The watch on his wrist was stopped at 2:13, although the photo was taken around noon. In the photo taken a second before entering, there is a shadow of a second figure next to him, although he was alone. In 2006, a family of 3 moved into the building after major renovations. The mother, going up to the 8th floor with her son, decided to use this elevator while her husband was parking the car. The doors closed. The husband arrived 10 minutes later. The elevator was on the 1st floor, but there was no one inside. No child, no mother. The police found no camera footage. The elevator, according to the documentation, was turned off. But the neighbor downstairs claimed to have heard voices coming from the shaft that night. Childish, distorted, as if through water. In 2015, a young woman named Ashley Mason attempted to explore the elevator herself. She lived on the 3rd floor and claimed that the elevator opened itself every day at 3:17 a.m. She spent a week observing, recording sound, and taking photographs. One night, she went inside with a camera. The last thing recorded was a reflection in the mirror behind her, where, besides her, there was another figure, tall with his head down. The camera fell. Ashley returned only in the morning, without shoes, with her shirt inside out. She was found sitting in the basement, repeating only one thing. He knows the floor, but he doesn't know where we are now. Engineers who examined the elevator could not find the mechanisms that ensured its operation. The cable had long been cut. There was no power supply. And yet the doors opened, the cabin went up and down, and sometimes traces of hands appeared on the interior walls of the elevator. Thin, like children's, stretched upward, as if trying to get out. Since 2018, the elevator entrance has been welded shut with a metal shield. But locals claim that at night, especially on windy November days, if you stand by the door, you can hear movement behind the steel paneling as if someone is going up again, or going down. Several people reported that after this, they began to have bouts of déjà vu, as if they had already lived in this moment, had already stood by this door, only in another life. One of the former residents, a retired engineer, said that he had once heard a legend from an old elevator operator, that in 1942, an experiment was conducted in this building with isolated vertical movement, a device that does not carry people across floors, but unfolds the space inside. and the elevator may not belong to the house anymore. It belongs to something between floors, between dates, between lives. Yellup Bridge of the Damned in Queens. In the Queens area, between residential areas and an industrial zone, there is a modest, unremarkable railroad bridge. It is not marked on tourist maps, does not appear in TV series, and is not considered a landmark. It's just a bridge, rusty, low, with a narrow road running underneath. And yet, the locals call it by one name, the Bridge of the Damned. The crossing in question is at Booth Avenue and 164th Street, near Jamaica Yard. 9 loss-of-control deaths have occurred there in the last 3 decades. Almost all of the accidents occurred for no apparent reason. Dry weather, daylight hours, cars in good condition. Official reports say drivers suddenly lost their bearings, unexpectedly drove into oncoming traffic, or crashed into bridge supports at low speed. Something doesn't add up. In 2003, a city maintenance worker named Thomas Kendrick was driving under the bridge in his car. He later said that as he passed, he saw a man in the shadows, standing close to the wall. He thought it was a homeless person, but when he turned around in the mirror to check, there was no one there. Just a black spot on the wall. Indelible. He tried to take a photo of it, but the image came out blurry. 2 days later, he was hospitalized with migraines and auditory hallucinations. He heard a voice repeating the same phrase, "Stop before you're down." Since 2010, anomalies in the operation of the bridge's equipment have been recorded. Car navigators turn off, and time on electronic clocks slows down or stops. Several drivers reported that when driving under the bridge, it suddenly became very cold, and the glass inside the car became covered with sweat, even in summer. Some said they saw a word on the wall, written with something dark, like coal or blood. Each saw a different word. Come back. Not here, not yet. In 2017, a teenager filming a TikTok video attempted to walk under the bridge at night as part of an urban challenge. The footage, which was saved by Reddit users, shows a rustling sound, followed by a female voice saying, "You're already there." After that, the camera falls. The boy was found in the bushes 6 hours later, with a cut on the back of his head and a blank expression on his face. He had no memory of how he got there. His family moved away 2 months later. Old-timers in the area say that there used to be a slave cemetery on this site. According to other rumors, under the bridge was the entrance to an old water purification mine, where workers died in 1924. However, there is no evidence in the city archives that this point was deliberately deleted from the city history plan. Neither engineers nor local historians can find official drawings of the soil under the bridge. The land in this place is not mapped. At one point, the bridge was set to be demolished, but something always got in the way. An accident the day before, a sudden equipment failure, a contractor's refusal. In 2021, city engineer Elijah Cohen resigned after spending the night on the site guarding construction materials. He claimed that for 2 hours someone had been knocking on the walls outside, although there was a concrete support outside. In the morning, he found a symbol on the door of the van that looked like an ancient spiral, elongated, broken, as if scratched with nails. Today, locals avoid this crossing. Drivers turn around early, preferring to make a detour. Google Maps often skips this place when plotting a route, as if by default, and only occasionally, accidentally or out of ignorance, does someone drive under the bridge. And if you listen closely, right in the middle, you can catch a strange transition of silence, as if the sound is turned off for a moment. The world becomes deaf, and it seems that someone is watching, from inside the concrete, from behind the support, from behind the glass. Music from underground in Greenpoint. Greenpoint is one of Brooklyn's oldest neighborhoods. It's a mix of 19th century industrial buildings, ramshackle townhouses, and new housing developments that have sprung up in the last 2 decades. The neighborhood has long been home to artists, programmers, and young families strolling the streets with coffee and dogs. But there is a phenomenon in Greenpoint that neither urbanism, nor acoustics, nor even psychology can explain. It is music coming from underground. According to dozens of independent reports, on certain nights, most often the 3rd Saturday of each month, between 2 and 4 a.m., residents of several neighborhoods hear a melody. It is not associated with clubs, cars, appliances, or church organs. This is old music, like a record, with crackling, with barely perceptible instruments, violin, piano, sometimes clarinet, no words, no radio call signs, only a melody, sad, drawn out, as if sounding from the depths of time. The strange sounds were first reported in 1994, when several elderly residents went to the police to complain about a night concert that was keeping them from sleeping. The police did not find the source. Years later, recordings began to appear on the internet, short audio files made on phones or voice recorders near open wells and basement holes. The recordings contained the very same music. The specialists to whom they were given could not determine either the style or the period or the exact composition of the instruments. Some said it is the 19th century, others that the structure of the work is too modern. Those who listened to the music described unusual effects. Some claimed that it induced vivid dreams, even in those who usually did not remember their dreams. Others said that the background music gave them a distinct feeling that someone from the past was nearby. Several people even said that they felt a sense of recognition, as if they had heard the melody in childhood, although there was no evidence for this. In 2012, musicologist Colin Hendricks attempted to identify the source. He conducted a series of nighttime recording sessions with directional microphones on various streets: Java Street, Noble Street, Franklin Avenue. On that third Saturday at 3:11 a.m., his equipment recorded a distinct sound of music, coming from below and slightly shifting toward the northwest. But a minute later, the signal disappeared, and the file itself, when he tried to play it, turned out to be empty. All the digital data was there, but there was no sound. The strangest thing is that the music never repeats itself. Those who recorded it in different months received different fragments, different keys, different lengths. But everyone's mood is the same: melancholy, premonition, longing for something unknown. One day in 2018, a teenager named Elisha Moreno heard music near a basement vent on Green Street and tried to go down. He entered the basement of an abandoned building through an old maintenance hatch and went down below, into an old drainage shaft. He was found 12 hours later on the surface, barefoot, empty-eyed. He said nothing coherent except one: "They didn't want me to listen to the end." The police brush it off, chalking it up to city noise, tired ears, coincidences. But there are those in Greenpoint who, every third Saturday, set a timer, go outside, freeze by the manhole, and wait. Because at that moment, the street changes, the air gets thicker, the silence is ringing, and suddenly, from underground, from a crack in time, music sounds, as if someone is still playing, down there, for someone, or for themselves, or for us, so that we don't forget that the city remembers. Temple under the City Hall building. The New York City Hall building is one of the oldest administrative buildings in the city. Built in 1812, it has become a symbol of power, order, and political life in the metropolis. Flags fly above it, press conferences are held, and key decisions are made. But beneath its foundations, if you believe those who have once found themselves too close to the technical zones, lies something that has nothing to do with democracy, law, or urban infrastructure. Underneath New York City Hall, there may be a temple, stone, prehistoric, and forgotten. The first oddity surfaced in 1997, when a group of engineers were installing a cooling line in the underground part of the complex. While drilling, the drill stopped abruptly, as if it had hit something much more solid than concrete. Excavations revealed dense stonework consisting of processed slabs of unknown origin. Geologists determined that the material was not local limestone, nor was it Appalachian granite. It was black quartzite, typically found in South America or North Africa, and had never before been found in natural deposits in New York. After the slab was discovered, the area was quickly sealed off. Engineers were given a cease and desist order, and a week later, the project was reoriented, allegedly due to tectonic instability. But one of the contractors, who soon quit, admitted in an interview with a local blog that there was an opening under the area leading to a room he described as a room with round walls and a pattern resembling a solar disk. In 2003, an independent researcher, an archivist by training, found a drawing from 1861 in a closed section of the Municipal Archive. It showed a round hall under the City Hall with the caption, "Ancient Vault, Non-Disturb." Later, this sheet disappeared from the archive, but a card with an inventory number was preserved in the paper catalog. Now, it is also considered lost. According to urban legends, strange stones laid out in a spiral going into the ground were discovered in this area back in colonial times. local tribes did not approach this place, considering it a dead funnel. French chroniclers wrote about a silent circle, where the earth allegedly trembled even in windless weather. But with the development of the city, the place was built up, and all memories were pushed aside. Since 2010, City Hall employees have noticed strange electronic glitches in the basement areas. Locks would go out, lighting would change, and the climate control system would start showing negative values. One security report recorded the spontaneous opening of a sealed hatch leading to an unused area. The guard who went down later claimed to have seen something like an altar built into the ground, but soon recanted his testimony and was transferred to another department. In 2019, an anonymous source on Reddit posted an image they said was taken through a technical hole in the floor beneath an old archive. The photo shows a semicircular chamber with columns and niches, inside which are statues without faces. The image was quickly deleted. The account was blocked. Esoteric researchers suggest that beneath the City Hall building, there may be a ritual structure of prehistoric origin, used by ancient cultures long before the city was founded. There is a theory that this is one of the old world nodes hidden beneath modern megacities, in the place of which there were structures interacting with the Earth's fields, or the geomagnetic grid. Today, no one is allowed in. The basement levels of the City Hall buildings are closed, all plans have been redesigned, and access to the technical entrances is controlled by armed guards. And yet, those who work in the building at night claim that in certain rooms, especially in the northern part, the floor sometimes hums. Not pipes, not ventilation. A low, measured, ancient sound, as if somewhere below something resembling a mechanism was slowly and inexorably rotating. Or a cult. The disappearing F-Line train. The New York City subway's F-Line is one of the busiest in the system. It connects Queens, Manhattan, and Brooklyn, running dozens of miles underground. Thousands of commuters use its cars every day, going from home to work, from school to the park, from life to life. But in the deepest tunnels between 2nd Avenue and York Street, there is mounting evidence that a train is showing up that shouldn't be there. The first officially recorded deviation occurred in 2011. The operator of the traffic system noticed a non-standard train on the monitor, a train with a number that had long been written off from the database. It was moving along the F-line, but did not stop at any station. When they tried to track it manually, it disappeared. The operator assumed there was a glitch, but 6 weeks later, exactly the same train appeared on the screen again. Everything repeated itself. It passed the section without stopping, and disappeared without reaching the next node. The MTA attributed the incident to a signal reflection. But over the next few years, dozens of passengers and subway workers began telling similar stories. The train would arrive at the station unscheduled, dirty, with dim headlights. Sometimes it would be nearly empty, sometimes with figures inside, sitting too straight as if frozen. One passenger boarded one of these cars at J Street, and his phone suddenly went dead and his watch froze. When he got off, he realized the train hadn't stopped at any station between Brooklyn and Manhattan. And the strangest thing, no one else saw him. The platform cameras didn't record his boarding. In 2015, an MTA employee working at East Broadway reported that the doors opened on their own during her shift. Even though there was no announcement or train entering, a chill blew in from the tunnel, and for a moment she heard a muffled voice say, "This is not your way." The next moment, the platform lights flickered and the doors closed. There are reports of a train appearing on certain nights, usually the second Tuesday of the month, in the maintenance loop area near Church Avenue Station. It enters a siding that is not on the new layouts and disappears. One driver, who wishes to remain anonymous, claims to have boarded such a train, mistaking it for a reserve. Everything in the cabin was switched off. No display, no radio. The train started moving on its own. It moved almost silently, and the tunnel did not end. After 40 minutes of movement, it found itself in a dead end, where there were no rails, only concrete and dead silence. A second later, everything went dark. He was found only the next day, sleeping on a bench at the station in another part of the city. Those who have observed the train from the outside say it always looks dated, like it belongs to another era. Some claim that its number, 2057, belonged to a train that was decommissioned in 1974 after an unofficially recorded tragedy. Rumor has it that the train derailed on a test run, killing everyone inside, but the MTA has not confirmed that such an incident ever happened. Interestingly, when a ghost train appears, the information boards freeze or show absurd messages. Next stop unknown, you have already arrived, crossing is impossible. One station worker saved a photo of the board, which at 3:36 a.m. read, "Do not board." The board turned off a second later. Some passengers say that the train is not a technique, but a selection mechanism. It comes for those who are stuck in time, in choice, in themselves, who for some reason do not belong to the city or to themselves. And if you enter inside, you will not come out the same. There is one rule among the old depot workers. If you see a train arriving on an empty platform without an announcement, with the windows turned off and a light hum like a sigh, stop. Don't move. Don't go there. Because it may be a train that runs in a circle outside of time, a train with no destination. Anomaly on 23rd Street. On 23rd Street, between 7th and 8th Avenues, stands an early 20th century apartment building. It looks like hundreds of other buildings in the area. A brick facade, a staircase with cast iron railings, an old elevator, creaking floors. Ordinary people live here. Young couples, writers, old-timers in their 80s. Everything would be ordinary if not for one thing. Every Friday night, exactly at 2:47, something happens in the house that some call a time shift, others, a fall from reality, and still others simply remain silent, not wanting to remember. The first to complain were the tenants on the second floor. They claimed that on Friday nights all the clocks, both electronic and mechanical, stop working. Phones freeze, TVs turn off, even quartz watches freeze. The next day everything works again, but the time that has passed since the freeze never matches the real time. For some, 20 minutes are lost. For others, an hour and a half. For one person, 3.5 years, as he himself claims. In 2018, a student named Mira rented an apartment here. She started keeping a diary of observations, because on the first Friday she noticed that the light from the lamps began to flow along the walls, as if the room was moving with her, as if in a dream. She wrote in her notebook, "The space has shifted by a degree. I feel like the bed is no longer where it was." The security camera she installed in the kitchen recorded the chair rising slightly into the air and falling back down, with the recording time stopping at 2:47:06, and so on all devices. The neighbor upstairs, an artist, claimed that on these nights the paintings on the walls changed slightly. The faces in the portraits turned, the background became different. He tried to photograph it, but the pictures were ordinary images. He said, "Only when you're not looking, they live. And on Friday nights, they know you're not sleeping." The engineers failed to find any electromagnetic causes for what was happening. No leaks, oscillations, or vibrations. One of them, measuring the voltage in the socket, reported that at 2:47 the device showed -0.0 volts, a parameter impossible within the framework of physics. When he returned home, his watch was 8 minutes slow, and it was a mechanical watch with automatic winding. Interesting fact. In all the stories about this anomaly, people do not hear a sound. Complete ringing silence occurs to the second. Even the dogs stop barking. Even the old pipes that always groan in this house stop. Some describe the feeling as the city no longer existing. One tenant wrote, "I realized that New York was gone. I was there, but it wasn't. For a minute, it was gone, and everything was gone with it." In 2021, one of the residents, an elderly veteran who lived on the 4th floor, came down to his neighbors after another quiet Friday and said, "Today I saw a corridor, but not in the house. It was between floors, and it knew me." The next day he left for Canada and never returned. Nowadays, this house is not written about in the newspapers, but in city circles it has become an object of silent interest. There are cameras all around it that no one acknowledges. Some tenants claim that they have been offered discounts if they sign a non-disclosure agreement. A document that clearly states, "Do not describe the nighttime experience on 23rd Street to third parties or members of the press." And yet, every Friday at 2:47, at least one person in this house stays awake to check if the hands are still, if the reflection is moving, and if you can hear anything through the wall. Apartment with a blank wall. In the center of Manhattan, at the intersection of Lexington Avenue and 55th Street, there is a business-class residential complex, glass, security, electronic locks, rental contracts for $5,000 per month. In this house, like hundreds of similar ones, there is an automated check-in system. You sign a contract online, receive a code on your phone, opened the door without meeting with a realtor. In 2022, a young woman named Laura moved into apartment 1006. She received payment confirmation, a cleaning schedule, a personal access code. Everything seemed normal until she tried to enter the apartment. There was no door behind the number plate 1006. There was a blank wall, painted the same color as the hallway. No hinges, no cracks. Smooth, cold concrete. Laura thought she was on the wrong floor, but everything matched. The card, the electronic lock, the reservation number. When she put her phone to the reader, she heard the click of the unlocking, but the wall remained the same, as if the door had opened, but to nowhere. The receptionist was surprised, but did not help. Apartment 106 was listed as active, paid for, and with a tenant inside. Internal systems showed entrance recorded at 1342. Laura was standing outside at that time. 2 days later, she received an automated email. "Thank you for moving in. Your service cycle has begun." When she tried to contact the landlord, the phone went unanswered. On the third day, a courier came to her with a delivery signed for the resident of apartment 1006. The box read, "Thank you for coming back." Laura called the police. The patrol arrived, inspected the floor, a wall like any other. One of the officers ran the apartment number through the internal database and received the answer. Rental property deactivated since 1997. But in the management company's CRM system, property 1006 continued to be listed as active. Moreover, rent payments were received monthly from the same bank account for more than 10 years. A curious IT specialist from the service company decided to check the system access logs. He found recorded entries into the apartment, but each of them occurred at a different time of day, every week over the course of decades, and always at 3:14 a.m. on Fridays. Sometimes even on days when the house was completely disconnected from the network due to repairs. He decided to check where the commands to unblock were coming from. The answer surprised him. The sending server did not have an IP address. Literally, the requests were coming from nowhere. He was no longer employed by the company at the end of the month and could not be reached later. Residents of neighboring apartments said that on some nights they heard muffled footsteps behind the wall. Sometimes, a barely audible creak of a sofa, the clink of dishes, as if someone lived there. When an electrician once opened the ventilation panel leading to apartment 1006, he found only concrete behind it. But on the wall inside the ventilation, there was a chalk line drawn, a window with a windowsill and a cup. In 2023, writer and urban enthusiast Jonathan Hayes tried to investigate the story. He wrote about it on his blog, collected dozens of similar testimonies, and filmed it. A week later, the site was unavailable. All backups were deleted, and social media accounts were blocked at the request of the copyright holder. Only one screenshot was preserved in the archive. A phrase from the final paragraph of the article. "Some apartments are not rented out. They choose." At first glance, all these stories may seem like nothing more than urban legends, strange coincidences, paranormal rumors, or figments of the imagination. But time has proven one thing over and over again. Every legend contains a piece of truth, sometimes a forgotten detail, sometimes a recurring phenomenon that no one dares to explain. New York is not just a city. It is truly a living organism, holding within its depths the memory of things we are not yet ready to understand. And those who listen carefully know that some secrets never disappear. They are just waiting to be heard again.